I'm Eric. This is Venkat. We beat the Elfin Path by pulling water out of the sky.
Welcome back to the Beat the Elfin Path podcast. I'm your host, Ross Palmer. Joining me today is Erick Went, the CTO of Genesis Systems, and he's joined by Dr. Venkat Kode, a research scientist on the team. I'm not going to lie, Genesis Systems is one of the most exciting companies and product ideas I've ever become aware of yet. They manufacture the world's first and only sustainable air-to-water systems that can carbon capture. That's right, folks. They're generating fresh water from the air using integrated technologies never before conceived of. They've received several grants from the U.S. Air Force and the Army, and they're partnered with Google, Siemens, and more. They've raised tens of millions to date, and this is something that I personally cannot wait to buy. So here are Dr. Venkat Kode and Erick Went of Genesis Systems. Okay, so I have to admit, first of all, I'm really glad to have both of you here. We got three people. That's a rarity for me, so it's going to be more dynamic. It's going to be more fun. Thank you both for joining me. Super glad to have you both here on the show today.
Thank you for having us, Ross.
So describe to us the journey of creating this product, what it is, what it does, and how we got here.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack.
That's what I'm known for. So I was like, where's the question?
No. So maybe I'll talk a little bit about the birth of Genesis or how it all started. Our founder, David Steckenberg, was a pilot in the military, and he was flying over Qatar, and he watched trucks that were pulling water out of the last aquifer in Qatar, and taking that water to their eventual destinations. And from that point forward, Qatar had only 1.5 days of water reserve left. That's it. If there's any disruption to desal or anything like that, they only have 1.5 days left to survive. And he knew that this was something that was going to continue to worsen, and the problem of water scarcity was going to continue to grow. And at that point, he decided to solve this problem. He had some great access, being in the roles he was in the military, to some national labs. He found some best-of-breed solutions and some really interesting insights, which I can let maybe Venkat talk a little bit more to. And that speaks to our unique approach to this problem. You're going to see other people trying to pull water out of the air, and almost all of them are doing it with a refrigeration-type method, where they try and cool the air below the dew point so that water naturally forms. It's extremely energy intensive. And as we talk today, we're going to talk a lot about the nexus of water and energy. Our path is different. We chose a chemical approach. There are chemicals called hygroscopic solutions, which have a really high affinity for water. So that solution will naturally pull water out of the air with no energy required. And then we need just a little bit of energy to separate out the fresh water from that. So taking that approach gives us the ability to do this at an efficiency that makes sense to scale. So that's where you're really going to start to see this technology take off. And I can pass the baton to Venkat because he's far more brilliant than I am at all this stuff. So way more fun to let him talk about this.
Okay, great.
So my name is Venkat. I'm here, a research scientist at Genesis. I've been working with the great team here at Genesis for like past 6-7 months. So I lead the applied product R&D, and so I was originally from India, where I did my undergrad there, and then decided to move to US back in 2015 for my higher education, and then I started working in different academic labs, different nanomaterials, specialized in colloidal science and interfacial science. And then I completed my PhD and master's at Cleveland State, graduated successfully in 2021. And then I moved to University of Arkansas right after my PhD, working on multiple projects, how to sustainably produce chemicals or biochemicals from food waste using a catalytic bioreactor, membrane bioreactor. And then I understood how much energy is being put in to actually being in the environment of sustainable economy, and help recover the circular economy as well. And then I came across this Genesis website when I was looking for the full-time opportunities, and I was like, ooh, okay, they're pulling water from air, and this is a bold innovation. So I'm excited to be part of this team, and I appreciate the leadership, and especially Dr. Stuckenberg and the President Steve And Eric, CTO, our CTO, has brilliant mind. A lot of ideas revolving around his head all the time. So I'm excited to be part of this team and help solve the global water scarcity, which I have personally experienced, and I'll be discussing more stories along those lines shortly with you guys.
So Venkat, you worked with catalytic biomembrane reactors too? Because I did.
You did?
No, I have no idea what you're talking about. That sounds amazing, though. I have no clue what you're talking about. It took me every ounce of my mental strength just to remember those words. That's awesome. So clearly you are a smart dude. We know that for a fact. So we're talking about chemical solutions here. We're talking about energy. So does that mean I need some kind of chemical input here to do this? Do I need a steady stream of chemical inputs? What do I need to run this thing, which is essentially a self-contained container?
You're right. So you don't need any additional chemicals. It's a closed loop. It's kind of like when you see your air conditioner, there's chemicals inside of it, but you never see them, you never touch them, you never have to deal with them. So our solution comes in contact with the outside air, pulls the moisture, we loop it internally, it gets separated by our separation process. The fresh water comes out and the solution goes right back to collect more moisture from the air. So you never have to touch or experience those chemicals at all.
Incredible. So talk to me about power requirements then. What do I need to power this? You mentioned that energy is a big factor in these things.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question. So we do this at a bunch of different scales, right? We have our smallest unit, which we call the Water Cube Mini, which is a residential unit, and you would plug in, put it in your backyard.
Give me one now. Send it over.
Malibu's perfect. We'll ship one. We're around the corner. We'll get you one.
Good.
So one for your backyard. It works. It looks just like the external piece of your HVAC system. So it'll go in your backyard. It's about the same noise profile, about the same energy profile. It'll sit back there and make you water 100 gallons a day. It scales up though, right? So then we have a shipping container size version we call our 5.0. That's for, businesses, FEMA, emergency response, DOD, anybody who needs, to go drop a container. Hospitals have been looking at a lot lately, small island nations, and that's like 1,000 gallons a day for those bigger needs. But we also make these in plant size, right? Like think desal plant without all the negative effects, right? So we can make mass water. We've modeled these up to 100 million gallons a day, right? This is a huge problem. We need a huge solution, right? And so the energy varies between those three, right? Clearly the one in the backyard is very different than the desal plant, and each one has its own energy requirements. But we have pushed the technology to be the most efficient version of it for all three of those, right? Clearly there's economies of scale when you get really big, but all the way down to the smallest one, we're the most efficient atmospheric water generation on the planet.
Incredible. Have you talked to Gavin Newsom? I think he might want to hear about this. I hope he wants to hear about it.
A couple chats, yeah.
Because we need some solutions out here in California. And obviously, Qatar is worse, but here's getting pretty bad. And as we have this conversation, I don't know how it is in your neighborhood, Eric, but in my neighborhood, we are not allowed to water outside at all starting September 6th through the 20th. So 2 weeks of not being able to water at all. So things are getting pretty serious here in the state of California as well. Not quite Middle East serious, but serious. And there's no sign of let up in the future. Anybody who's been out here, this has been an incredibly hot summer, no clouds, no rain. I must admit that I'm getting a little personally concerned. How concerned should we be?
I mean, I'm not an alarmist, but I definitely think your concern is justified, right? And it's not just you. Las Vegas is doing the same thing. They're outlawing grass. Right? Yeah. Arizona's having the same things. We see it over the border in Mexico. This is not a problem that's going away.
No.
This is something that we're going to have to deal with. You're looking at the major reservoirs that feed California are close to a dead pool, right? They're not able to pass water further downstream. Everything on the Colorado is seeing trouble. California is being forced to cut back. A lot of that's going to be passed on to users like you. And we're hoping that we can be a piece of the solution to this, right? If you're using water that's coming from the sky, you're using less water. If a lot of people are doing that, it's less draw on the rivers and the aquifers that we use currently.
So some people are taking this very, very seriously. That's obvious. And some people with money are taking it very, very seriously. But it seems to me that the lay consumer, as it were, is not yet maybe focusing on these issues. How do you think the climate is changing? What's your perception of it?
Well, I mean, the most interesting metric for me, right, is when we started this, a few years ago, the first hour of any conversation, we had to explain to the people that there was a water scarcity problem. Right, we had to say, hey, listen, this is coming. It's going to be a problem. Water's not going to be easy, cheap, and free for the rest of our lives. And now that is a foregone conclusion. We walk in and people are like, hey, there's a water scarcity problem. I don't know if you knew. We need to start doing this, right?
Yeah.
So we can talk more about our solution and the problem. And that's been apparent at all levels, right? We have seen a quicker uptake, I think, on the industrial side or the commercial side than we thought we would. You look at a lot of companies like Microsoft and Google and I think Amazon, Facebook, a bunch of the big ones, even like Coca-Cola's, Pepsi's, Nestle's, who are pledging to be water neutral by 2030. They want to produce more water than they consume by 2030, right? So you can see that that it has shifted definitely in that space. So we're seeing a lot of movement there. And residential, I think, again, it's coming around. And like you pointed out earlier in your point, the reliance on a centralized infrastructure for all these things is not the strongest system. If we wanted to upgrade the water that you get in California, it's like $11 billion to upgrade the infrastructure to get the water from Colorado River to your faucet in Malibu, right? That's untenable. But if you look at what we've done with power, right, look at how many houses have solar. And if you've been part of any of the rolling blackouts or brownouts that have happened in Southern California, you'll look down the street and 1 or 2 homes still have lights on at night in the middle of that blackout or brownout. Those are the guys who picked solar. Those are the guys who picked a battery wall, right? Water, I think, is the next step. That decentralization of those commodities, right, that improves your resilience and your sustainability, right? Yep. You're self-contained. You're not reliant on these larger powers that be to provide you with the essentials of life. And I think we're going to start to see a strong movement from residential as they start to follow that same trend that they did with solar.
So you are basically still, like, what phase is the company in right now? You have a couple products that are prototype. Like, when are we going to market? What's the strategy there?
I'll start. Venkat, you can jump in whenever.
I gotta get Venkat. I gotta ask him some questions. I don't know. I'm looking at you, man. I'm gonna hone in on you.
Yeah, I was trying to add more points to your previous statement that people are not ready or not realizing how painful the water scarcity can be because it's scary, and I have personally experienced back in India. So during my childhood, I came from a place where we had to walk miles, to be able to get access to potable water sufficient for like a couple of weeks, for the whole family, and I've been suffering in fact, my personal health, it has been affected, and I've been suffering from fluorosis. And in case if you come across people who don't realize or thinking that, we don't need it right now, let them feel free to contact me. I'll tell them and I'll make them scared, sharing my stories, how painful it is.
Yeah. I think it's the Benjamin Franklin quote, right? We know the worth of water when the well runs dry.
Yep.
And, you see it isolated situations, Flint, Michigan's, Jackson, Mississippi, and, all of Southern California is starting to feel it right now. And, you can see people are getting that personal experience with this water scarcity issue now. So it's starting to grow. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to turn directions here. We're going to get a little bit negative and a little bit scary because I have to ask this. So I'm a big fan of philosophy, and if you're familiar with Immanuel Kant, there's this thing called the categorical imperative, which is we judge our actions based on if everybody did this thing, what would happen? So if I'm kind to you, and if everybody was kind to everybody, we can say that's a good thing. So it probably makes sense for me to be kind to you. So the question when it comes to something like this, I know, being ahead of the curve and interested in this, when Venkat sends me this prototype, I'm going to be sitting pretty with 100 gallons a day. I'm going to be able to live the Southern California lifestyle for an extended period of time. I will be fine. Now, if everybody does this at scale, what is the consequence of pulling all that moisture from the air? Are we going to see other problems? Is it going to make the general problem worse in some way? Do we have any kind of data on that?
I can start, Venkat, unless you want to jump in.
Yeah, you can start. I can add more details.
Yeah, absolutely.
To that.
So we do have that data, and that's an excellent question and a great place to start. And one of the I know when I joined, that was my number one question, right? So and the interesting things are the amount of moisture in the air is increasing every year. Moisture in the air is an accelerant to climate change, more so even than carbon dioxide, right? The amount of moisture in the air is massive, nearly 40 quadrillion gallons at any given time, right? So there's two answers to your question. One if everybody did it, we would still be a drop in the bucket. There's that much moisture. The more important answer to the question, though, is we would move it in a positive direction. So if we were able to pull out any substantial moisture out of the air, we would slow down the cycle of climate change, right? Because it's an accelerant to climate change. So by pulling moisture out, we're actually slowing that and hopefully having some impact on this overall problem. In truth, we probably wouldn't pull out that much. Where you might see some interesting positive changes is places where you have heat islands, like, around the corner from you in Los Angeles. It is hotter in Los Angeles. It is perceivably hotter in Los Angeles because of all of the water vapor that's pushed out of all those millions of air conditioners all the time, right? We're just pumping water vapor out of cars, out of air conditioners into the atmosphere, and you get what's called a heat island. Concrete and reflections and all that make the city actually hotter. So if the entire city started pulling moisture out of the air, LA would start to feel cooler, right? You would have localized positive impacts, but global positive decrease is going to be really hard to do because it's a massive amount of water that we need to pull. So little to no effect, but if there is effect, it's the right direction, not the wrong direction.
So that's impossible. That's obviously too good to be true. There's no way.
So that data's out there. So one of our investors is one of the X Prize fellows who designed the water challenge. So they put out a water challenge, I think 2016, 17. And before they went out and did the water challenge, they went and ran all this research, put millions of dollars into research on what the impacts would be if we did this on a truly global scale. If you replaced all of desal, if you replaced our current water system with an atmospheric water generation type system, what would the impacts be? And this is all the basis of their data. The NOAA also ran a similar study on what the effects of moisture in the atmosphere are and what impacts could be made by adding or decreasing moisture to the atmosphere. So it does seem too good to be true, but it's backed up by some really solid science. So I'm glad.
Fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have about 10 to the power 21 liters of fresh water in the Earth's atmosphere. So it's dynamic. Even though you pull it out, it would recover faster, and which is equivalent to 75% times all the water content in lakes, rivers, ponds, and everything. So we are definitely not running out of moisture in the air. So I totally agree with Eric.
Yeah.
So along those lines, especially here in Southern California and certainly in Los Angeles, major metropolitan areas, the water quality that comes out of the tap is bad. And there are websites that you can look at where you can see all the crap that's in there. And it's arsenic, it's lead, it's chromium, it's all of the stuff that Aaron Brockovich was working about. You talked about Flint, Michigan, the things that were in there from fracking. So we know that a lot of the municipal water supplies are horrible, chlorinated at the very least. They get pipes and all of that. They're at the old apartment I lived at, if I ran a bath, it was bright blue in color, and it was just noticeable that, this is because it was an ancient building and old pipes, etc. So do I need to filter this stuff? Does your product filter it? Is it better quality? What kind of water is coming out of this?
I'll start again. I'll let Venkat come in with the really good science. It's really pure water. We actually have to add minerality back to the water. So it comes out at an extremely high purity. In fact, some of the people we're talking to are, out in California, people making anything silicon-based need ultra pure water, right? And we're pretty much there. We're talking to data centers, and one of the unknown secrets about data centers is a lot of them are very water hungry, like up to 30 million gallons of water per day hungry.
Whoa.
Right? So we're talking to a lot of people in industrial or beverage because our water is so pure. For somebody like you and for our home unit, we actually add minerality back into the water before we give it to you. That's one of those things, right? Like the decentralization of your water supply means that you have control over that. It is not going through 700 miles of pipe from somewhere on the Colorado River, through all kinds of, minerals and aqueducts and whatnot to get to you, right? You know the supply chain of your water, right? It came from the sky into the box into your backyard through a filter into your mouth, right? It's a much shorter chain where we know all the parts and pieces to it. So yeah, it is more pure by a long shot. In fact, we add back in things for you so it tastes the way you want it to taste.
Yeah, exactly. So the amount of errors, the probability of errors, in our system are minimal because, as Eric mentioned rightly, so when you have that supply chain, so there are multiple cases of contamination. It could be coming from pipes or leakages or any sort of other means of contamination or chemicals. Like back in I recently read an article where in India, so a lot of chemicals have been released through different water streams from industries. So it's get contaminated into groundwater, and then when you pump, that groundwater is coming in green color. So, I mean, there is a high probability that groundwater is being contaminated, and then even the filtration takes a lot of energy for drinking purposes or any other applications. So, for us, in especially using the atmospheric water, so we have very minimal risk of contamination, and we do use high productive filters when at the air inlet and also the water outlet. So trying to potentially kill any sort of bacteria or any protection for human health. So yeah.
Do you think that this method will become a percentage of these cities? What percentage do you think it might be? More than 10% in the next so many years?
Excellent question. A lot of variables. I do think so. I mean, I think you're right. You look to some places that have massive amounts of rainfall. They have other means by which to capture and gather. But a lot of the parts of the planet, anything that's a few miles away from, an existing abundant water source. Yeah, I think this will become a major portion of the water, and starting with places like, Arizona, bunches of Mexico, Texas right now. North Texas is just crazy. Southern California, how many veto desal plants have gone through, right? It's that we realize in Southern California. I mean, Malibu, the ocean is part of the ethos, right? The ocean is part of the culture, and you don't want to go ruin your ocean ecosystem so people can water their lawns, right? So yeah. I think we understand that intimately, right? So I do think, in huge parts of Australia, the Middle East, I think that's where it's going to start, and we'll have large portions of market capture. And I think it'll continue to work its way outward into other places where they're like, I don't want to damage other ecosystems at the cost of water. So yeah. I think it'll start in certain regions where it will be high percentage, and other places will continue their current ways, and will grow.
And we are also reaching the peak salt condition where people trying to pull more salty water out of ocean and trying to desal that, and then the concentration of salt in the existing ocean water is increasing, thereby like affecting the ecosystem of the aquifers and all so forth. So it's getting terrible out there.
Yeah. Yes. So let's talk timelines about this business. So the technology, because it's a relatively new business, right? 2017 was sort of the origin, and Venkat was saying before we jumped on this call that it was sort of in stealth mode for a while, and then we emerged. How did you go about bringing this to market? What was the process? Because there's been some funding. Obviously, I saw somewhere $20 million in funding in the first 2 or 3 rounds. How did you go about bringing this product out?
Yeah, excellent question. It's been a journey, right? This is one of those things that start out day one. We had to convince people there was a problem. Day two, we had to convince people that this was even possible, right? And I think day three was showing people that we can do it at a scale and efficiency that it could actually solve the problem, right? So it went back and forth between raising money from investors, finding grants, building the first prototype so that you had some validity and some understanding, and people could come out and kick the tires and drink the water, right? And realize that this was an actual real thing. We weren't doing magic. It was real science. And then we iterated, right? We took a lot of what we learned from best practices in other industries and our previous experiences to build quickly, to build smart, to build efficiently, to get through iterations and improve on the product to the place where it's at today, right? And now we have multiple prototypes, multiple tests. We've had national labs come and test. We have different streams of grants we're working with. We're working with both government sectors, municipal and individuals, right, on prototyping out our technology. We have multiple manufacturers who we're separating it out to build in. We're raising a Series A round at $50 million right now, which we're hoping to close in the next few weeks so we can get back to the hard stuff. But yeah, it has been an amazing journey, right? And we've had to leverage all our collective talents of our board, our team to get to where we are today, and it's going to continue to grow at an absolutely blistering pace, and hopefully we'll be getting a unit out in the not too distant future.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and we have been working on some exciting projects in the lab, especially one of the biggest pain point in our case was the energy during the regeneration side, right? Like you capture water and then you have to release the captured water using our proprietary fluids. So, and we recently developed a technology where you can just almost use no energy just to release that captured water out of our proprietary fluid. So this is very exciting and great to be part of this team.
Yeah.
Looking forward. Yep.
Well, you mentioned go ahead, Eric.
No, I was just going to say that. I mean, that could be a whole nother show, Ross. When we when we can actually make that public, it's going to be a whole nother breakthrough in the space. So we can't wait to.
I would love to. Yeah, we'll reconnect then. I'm very very eager to do a part 2 on this. Yeah. Nothing is more important. So I'm game if you all are. I'll just put it to you that way. Or if we do a special episode, that's fine too. We know, so Venkat, you obviously have a very strong academic background. You wisely moved from Cleveland to Florida. Good call. Just kidding.
Actually, Cleveland to
Arkansas.
Cleveland to Arkansas.
Then you kept going. Yeah. Just kidding. We love Arkansas and we love Ohio. But so you come from an academic background, but Eric, what were you working on prior to this project?
Oh wow, great question. I hope you have like 2 hours left.
Sure.
No, I'll give you the Cliff Notes version. I was a mathematician and physicist turned unwilling entrepreneur. Way back in my still love of sustainability and whatnot, we made an engine, ran it off of hydrogen back out of college. Started that company, raised $1 million, thought we were going to disrupt Detroit. Turns out Detroit didn't want to be disrupted, so they didn't want a new engine. So I started a software company to pay back my investors from the first company. Started a string of startups, some over 100 I think we've counted now.
No way.
On multiple continents. Yeah, spent some time in Brazil, all over Europe, all over Asia. Kind of came back and left the startup game, had a few decent exits and said, okay, I think I'm done with all that. We were in California, had a small portfolio of emerging technology companies, all kind of impact tech. Like everything we did was a moonshot. Everything was designed to save the world. And then we did a little partnership with the government where they were saying, hey, listen, you've done this innovation thing really fast and for a long time. How can we get a little piece of this? I ran into them speaking at a conference and I was like, hey, listen, we can take a napkin and get it to a store shelf in Best Buy in 6 months. And they were like, it takes us 36 years to get from a napkin to a battleship. How do we work on that accelerated timescale? So we put together a rapid prototyping lab with them and we started, scouting tech. And they threw us a bunch of problems which were fun to solve. The one problem we couldn't solve was water. We looked at, no joke, hundreds of different technologies that were coming down the pipe in water, and nothing would solve the massive scale of the water problem that both the government and the world itself were looking at. So I was a little bit disheartened that we were not able to solve that problem for them. And a couple months later, through a bunch of odd connections, the Stuckenbergs showed up and said, hey, we heard that you might be the right guy to help us solve this problem. And
wow.
It was one of those goosebump moments. We met at a little airport in the middle of California, and I was like, oh man, this could actually scale and do the job. And I fought for the longest time. I'm like, man, I don't want to go back in the startup game. My wife's going to kill me.
Yeah,
I'm not going to do it. And we argued for a while, and finally it was too compelling of a mission. It was something that we could actually do to make a giant dent in this problem, and I onboarded back on as the CTO, and I was like, we're gonna go solve this. So it's been an amazing and fun part of the whole journey, and I couldn't be happier. We've made tremendous strides since then, and watched amazing people like Venkat move this technology into places that we never thought possible. So it's been an exciting road.
That's phenomenal, Venkat. Where were you doing before this?
Well, actually, I'm on a personal mission. While joining the hands of Genesis to help solve this global war scarcity that I had gone through this painful life in my childhood. So as I mentioned that we had difficulty accessing potable water, a lot of health issues that are being caused by water scarcity during my childhood. I'm still suffering. They're irreversible, and a lot of friends, in fact, in India who are still in touch with me share very similar experiences with water scarcity and their and its repercussions in their life. And this is very real and still exists even now, like as a growing issue. And indeed, we hear a lot globally in everyday news as well, right? So, and this connects with my expertise, like where I had worked academically for like past 4 or 5 years during my PhD, master's, postdoc. How do I connect this piece to the mission that I'm on, and how do I improve the technology overall to help contribute to this great mission, that bold innovation, taken by the great leadership team and Eric here. So this it has been phenomenal for the past 6 months, and I'm learning a lot from the team as well. So I'm excited to be part of this team.
No kidding. Two things that I love about doing this. I get to talk to really smart people, and I just enjoy hearing the way that really smart people think. That's a great, great, great pleasure of mine. I really enjoy the way that you think about things. But the other thing that I would like for other smart people, my one ambition with this show is that somebody out there who is also smart makes the decision to use their smartness to better ends. Because obviously somebody such as yourself, you would probably be successful in any number of companies, any number of startups. You could be the CTO of any organization. Same with you, Venkat. You could easily both do pretty much whatever you wanted with the track record that you have. So to convince people such as yourself to focus on things like this, that would be my number one goal with doing this kind of thing. So having made that leap, and you said your partner, Eric, didn't obviously want you going back into startup land, but it was just so dang compelling that you had to do it. So having made that leap and being here now, Venkat, it's 6 months for you. How do you feel waking up every day to work on this? Do you feel a different kind of motivator? Are you more excited to come in? Are you more fulfilled? What is it like to work on a project of this scale?
Well, I mean, worst case can be hard to imagine, and I'm excited. Like every day, like what kind of things can we do in the lab to make a bigger impact on the humanity? Right? So if I could come up with a technology that minimizes the energy requirements by even 1 kilowatt hour per gallon, that would be a huge deal, right? So that's what motivates us. Like, how do you keep doing things what you've been doing or what you've been taught to do in the lab, and that would impact the global water scarcity minimization. So I've been really excited to work in the lab every day and coming up with new solutions, research solutions to solve this energy problem. So I mean, we recently discovered a great technology, like as I mentioned, how do we tweak the proprietary fluid to to minimize that energy requirement. So that's what keeps us going. Those rewarding moments keeps us going, every day.
Eric, any thoughts?
I mean, yeah, it's. I made the decision early on, right? It's easier to wake up in the morning if you're contributing some greater good, right? And that's kind of always been the direction I wanted to take. But this is taking it to another level. And I mean, again, Ross, it's great that. I think it's amazing what you do, and that's another thing that's severely lacking in our world right now is people who are sharing this message. This message. I think you're right. It is these collisions, right? I got in touch with this on a complete serendipitous moment, right, where I met two people in an airport, and that got passed to me by somebody who probably knew nothing about this, right? But somebody like you, I believe it's those collisions, right? There's somewhere out there, a scientist who's working on something in a lab that could help propel us forward 100x, right? And I'm hoping that they're watching your show and go, holy cow, I could do this, right? Or there's somebody somewhere who's in a water scarce situation who's like, I have no hope. And then they see your show and they go, hey, now I have hope, right? It is these serendipitous collisions that can be created by people like you in mass that can help us get both the problem further out there and the solution further down the road. So I thank you for what you do, because again, this is how we're going to meet the next person who's going to help us save the world.
Well, I really, really do appreciate that. And my philosophy is very much in alignment with yours in the sense that technology is this big thing. Is it good or is it bad? But we know that it can be good. We know that there's often unintended consequences of the stuff that we do, or something that was good 50 years ago. We say, oh, but when you multiply that out, it turns out it causes all these other things. Because cars, huge breakthrough, amazing. And then we built everything around cars. And I was like, well, maybe got to reconsider that one. So it's always evolving. But If anything is going to save us, I believe it is technology. That's just what I think. I don't think there's really anything else at this point. Things have gotten so dire. We know that we've missed so many deadlines. Now, there's a complacency to that where the lay person might say, oh, they'll figure it out. They being the ambiguous scientist or somebody's going to solve this problem. But of course, at some point, that somebody has to be the proverbial you, the proverbial me. At some point, we have to actually decide to try to solve this. So there's an optimism there, but it's a nuanced optimism. It's not just like, well, we'll be fine, somebody will figure it out. It's like, well, we might be fine if we pool all of our resources and all of our brain power and all of our smart people at this and explore all of these avenues. And the extent to which you have done that, Eric, is just mind-boggling, that you have gone through hundreds of solutions, hundreds of companies. That's pretty wild. And then you arrive here again by a coincidence. So who knows? But I'm very, very glad that you're doing it. I'm very, very glad that you're fighting this fight.
You make it sound more glamorous than it was. There's a lot of, dumpster fires and
right.
and crashes along the way, right? But same thing, right? We're all doing what we can with what we have to solve the problems before us, right?
Well, fantastic. I mean, I know we're running over. We had a little bit of a slow start, so I want to bring this episode more or less to a close, but I'd like to give you each the final word. What is one thing that you think that one step that the average person can take? I'll let each of you answer this. What is one thing that somebody could or should do?
Venkat, you want to start?
Like in terms of what changes that they could make in a day-to-day life. I mean, what I could really suggest is try to minimize the water usage as much as possible wherever it's necessary or it's needed. So, I mean, steps like, for example, I've gone through the academic background a lot, and then I have beaten the often path by joining Genesis, right? Which they have taken a great initiative with a bold innovation on how to produce water from air with minimal energetic costs and resources. So I would suggest, scientists like myself out there, try to connect their expertise with the mission that they're really passionate about, and then try to work for it. Money, it comes along the way. Shouldn't be an issue. And otherwise, I would spend 4 years in grad school, So, so I always encourage, try to connect their passion to the expertise. Yep. To solve these problems, like
great insight.
What I've been.
Yeah, mine's probably not too far off there, and I think you stole my tagline, Venkat. I was going to say, these people, I think they have to, beat the often path, right? Like our enemy isn't, water scarcity. It's the apathy, right? Like I don't think there is the one thing is doing one thing. Get off the couch, get off the sidelines, get in the game. Match that one thing that you're really good at with that one thing you're really passionate about. If that's just sharing, right? You see this podcast and you tell 10 people, right? You're really good at, talking to people and shouting about it and, expanding. Fantastic. If you're a scientist, get in the lab, right? If you're whatever you are, whatever your skill set is, and just commit to helping be part of the solution, not part of the problem.
Well, that's a great way to wrap it up. And gentlemen, it's been a tremendous honor to speak to both of you. It's been an absolute pleasure. So grateful. And yes, please, I'm not kidding, put me in touch with your sales. We are going to, that will be an episode. We're going to document the install of this thing. So we'll reconnect whenever y'all are ready. I'm very much looking forward to the day. But thank you so much, both of you, for making time out of your busy schedule to sit with me.
Will do. Ross, thank you so much. It's been a privilege. Keep doing what you do.
Thank you.
And
Ross.
with that, the official podcast is over.